Welcome to Your Town. I'm Chef Wendy Brodie with Art of Food, and my guest today is the most wonderful guy and so important in my well-being in life that I've got to share him with the rest of all of you. And his name is Antonio Raimondo, and he is a personal trainer and a vegetarian consultant and many more things. And he's got such a great philosophy that I want to pick his brain and share it with you. One of which is hydrating. So I toast all of you with a glass of water and remember to drink it more often, but we'll hear more about that from him and why it's especially important.
Exactly.
Welcome,
Cheers.
dear friend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Well, besides being a fitness trainer, I have learned the importance, since I'm a food person, but you can't separate your physical well-being, your breathing, and your consumption of all of the above has made me think differently. I'm not just cooking food. I'm not just hunched over cooking. Anyway, please talk about how you got started in all of this. And I know a lot of times it's through adversity people come to great truths about we all have to learn how to take care of ourselves from ourselves. But please go ahead.
I guess it all began, easy enough. I'm Italian, so I grew up in an Italian household. And my dad was a great chef and great cook. He wasn't a professional chef, he was just a great cook. And
I remember meeting him.
Yeah, that's right. And so he always took great pride in eating foods that were high quality. And I think it's basically how it's done in Italy in general. Like there's a lot of pride in the cuisine of the peoples there, and everybody attempts to eat highest quality kinds of food that are grown simply to a degree, not organic per se, but to that kind of level. And so that's one thing that was always in my household. So eating well, eating just high quality foods, lots of salads, lots of veggies. And as a kid, I always had just more of an affinity for like pasta and vegetarian foods, not so much meat. Whereas my brother was always very much more into meat. So that was so I think that's that's unique to each individual.
Yes.
But I also had a lot of digestive issues as a little kid. So since I was very young, and it could have been some of the dairy, maybe an intolerance to dairy, and I didn't know that at the time. And of course, dairy is a big part of Italian cuisine and whatnot. And I used to then work out, and I started eating, like a lot of protein kinds of rich foods, or making smoothies and shakes, that had a lot of protein in it. Always using milk, and I would always still have in my early or late teens, even in my early 20s, I would have a lot of sort of stomach sort of pains, digestion issues. So then, when I was living in Germany, I think like your last guest, right? And and we have the same hairstyle, same barber. No, so I was living in Germany 3 years, and there's very sort of meat-rich, the diet. So I wasn't really digging it. I wasn't really liking it. So I thought, okay, when I get back to the States, which I had plans to do in my, when I was about 21, I thought, okay, I'm going to see what vegetarian is about, or just give it a shot, see if maybe there's something to do with why I'm not having an easy time eating certain foods. So then I happened to then, by a chance, when I get back to the States, met a girl who was vegan, who was eating a vegan diet. So she introduced me to it, and I read about it, and I thought, okay, this sounds like I could try it, give it a shot. So I started doing that. So I ate, and I have been eating a vegan diet for now since I was 21, 19 years. So, and it's going well. It almost right away I stopped getting the kind of colicky, digestive issues. And that was big for me. That was already a good motivation. It was already, I cut out the milk, which took a couple months because that was the hardest thing, because, you get used to milk. It's
it goes back to the very beginning, doesn't it?
Well, Italians put like Parmesan cheese on everything, on cereal, so you have a hard time letting that go. So there were some foods that were hard to give up on. But you make a decision, you try to go for it, and I went for it, and it worked out, and it was also self-motivating because it kept feeling good. And so that's how it began for me to focus on that. From there, then I got into meditation to see about just working through the things that are in our brains. That as we grow up, we sort of can't help as we're little kids, things that we have in our family and our growing up, and just seeing what the next level would be to get command the body and to learn how to have an easier time on this planet, as you're growing, as you're living. And so meditation was one. I was working out a lot. I started doing yoga. I started doing Tai Chi, Qigong. And so all with the diet all together, it sort of evolved into an understanding for my own body and a sort of an awareness of what was working, what wasn't working. I became a massage therapist. That was another very interesting way to look about how healing works and how it all flows together. And so it's led me to here now and incorporating all those things into our training, as you know. And so it's, some adventure.
Well, something that was so important that I've realized being on this planet as long that, this person can eat this great diet and be healthy and exercise, but maybe they're stressed, so different issues, and the same person can be eating the same diet and be doing very well, and maybe the meditation portion. But stress, that's another thing that I've learned from you, is that to always take a few minutes out, and it's not about exercising that hour or half hour of it, that this is something all day to be present. And of course, being in a gym and seeing everybody on the treadmills or this machine and that machine, a lot of them, people have the headphones, and I'm probably guilty in other ways, listening to a book on tape or watching the TV monitors that are going on. But you made me realize that being present, think about and feel your body, and each time we're together, you ask, how are you feeling? And then each of us that are part of your group, we sort of do an inventory, and you're able to make us assimilate. Maybe we've slept wrong or lifted something the wrong way. And so you have all these wonderful techniques to pay attention to stretch out. And then the other thing besides that I want you to talk more about is the breathing, and just breathing is an art form, and I didn't, that's kind of hard to do when you stop to think, to breathe correctly. But all of that combines with our eating and food, and that's why I thought we can't just talk about food without talking about the rest of our living and movements and everything.
Yeah, exactly. No, and that's the thing. We think about, when we boil it down, we're looking at, when we operate the body, we're operating at an instinctive level first. And that's how we are as an animal, as a species on this planet. We come into an instinct. So the instincts should be followed in what's natural, what works. So when we look at breathing, for instance, it's a nutrient. If we think of it that way, that
was it. That was the magic word you said before, and I thought, of course, air is food too.
Air is a type of nutrient, right?
Or nutrient,
we've boiled it down scientifically to what's in air, and we know that there's a component, oxygen, the main one, let's say, that we want to extract mainly. And it's just like food. When we're digesting food, we're trying to extract some of the nutrients so we can actually use them to operate the body or to build the body or to heal the body or whatever it might be. And so when we're looking at breathing, there is that kind of flow as well. There has to be a reason beyond just the components of it in terms of if we were to think about breathing on an instinctive level, without knowing anything about oxygen, without knowing what's in air, whether it's good or bad, or what science has told us or a textbook has told us, how do we understand what breathing is? It's basically by feeling. So when we look at the brain is mainly composed of just feeling what's going on internally in the body or even externally to skin. So most of the brain has that sort of, all the nerve endings, all the wiring is designed to feel what's going on inside or on the outside, and that's a good chunk of what the brain is for. So it is to operate our body. So when we take a breath, we look at how breathing is performed, and it's usually a muscular activity when we do it on purpose. So when we take a breath on purpose, we expand the ribs and then we release and relax that expansion. So breathing becomes a movement. So it becomes about a feeling of that movement, because we're not looking in the mirror when we're doing it necessarily. So we feel how that affects our body. And anytime anybody's stressed, you tell them take a deep breath, because we know that sigh gets rid of that pressure or that feeling of tension.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So when we look at it that way, then breathing is even beyond the nutrients you're getting from it, but more about the feeling of it as well on top of that. So then you combine it to food. If you think of food, when we're hungry, it's a pressure that we're getting from the cells of our stomach essentially, or in our body, telling us eat something. And when we were very little, we didn't understand that, and it was even a stress, and so we cried or we had an emotional reaction to it. And then we learned, it's easy to take care of this discomfort. You just put something in your mouth that feels pretty good, and you eat it, and you're good. So when we look at the nutrients we can extract from food, or food in general, it has to be something that satiates that pressure. But then it goes beyond that, because food doesn't just go in and come right back out in a second. It stays in our body for a while. So we want to look at then what we're eating as having a feeling that feels good, a lasting feeling. And so by focusing on our breathing, we slow down the brain to a high level of sensation. We really become highly sensate to our body, like we were born to be, like little babies are. Really feel everything and are very present with their bodies. So we go into that instinct, and then we can feel through our breathing our body to that high level. So then when we eat something, we understand whether it's something that's going to benefit us or not. Just like any animal in the woods is going to learn to eat certain foods over others. And I feel that we have that instinct in us, and we just have to tune into it. And sometimes the thing that tunes us in our daily lives, because we're so distracted, there's so much going on, is maybe just focusing on something as simple as the breath. It's something as basic and as natural and as instinctive as taking a deep breath. And sort of discovering what that feels like instead of thinking we know what it is already.
Another thing that you brought up, an animal in the woods, with your interest in animals and pets, and you're a great pet sitter too, I know.
Yeah, love hanging out with dogs.
Anyway, you always help us relate to our animal instincts, even though maybe our brains want to rise above that, but pointing out how just getting out of bed in the morning, animals don't leap into action. There's a stretching, and they'll let you...
It's a little kind of shaking out or lengthening or opening of their bodies through a breath. A lot of times, And when we look at, and I bring up dogs because we see dogs all the time. Of course, a dog is not the closest relative to a human being, but if we had chimpanzees around, or we had some orangutans hanging out, where we were, it would be a little easier to watch those guys. But watching a dog, I feel a couple things happen. One, it humbles us. It makes us feel like, okay, we can connect to nature and who maybe our essence still is, even though we've made long strides as a species in terms of becoming a little more sort of what we feel is evolved or transcending certain animal instincts. We can still tune into the ones that are there and that are still calling us and still affecting us. And so when I talk about dogs, is because they're right there in our lives, and then also it brings us back a little bit, maybe to humble us a little bit, to think of, okay, we're not that different from a dog in certain respects. A dog's body, I believe, is easier to control. It's easier to adapt a dog's body because their ranges of motion being a little more limited in their arms and their legs and their torsos and the way they stand up and the way they move. A human body, as we all know from experience, is very challenging. It's very difficult to move correctly and operate in a way that's athletic constantly on a daily basis. And so I find that, by combining a personal training sort of viewpoint where we look at an animal like a dog and say, okay, some of the similarities that your dog does, we can use as well, and just basically observing them, brings us back a little bit and helps us maybe connect to an animal like that as somebody that we can also learn from, not just constantly tell what to do. So and that's where I've boiled down, as you know, the training is just that instinct again. Let's just go back for a little bit and backtrack a little bit, despite all the information we know, all the interesting things we've learned scientifically and through technological advances and whatnot about the human body, which are valuable. We can also look and kind of sort of blank the mind a little bit and just feel instead if we're doing something correctly or not.
Yes.
And to go off of that too, and
And then when I welcomed you, trying to toast you with a glass of water, I really didn't realize until getting older and like leg cramps and all of that kind of thing, it's hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. And I thank you for that. My husband thanks you for that.
Absolutely.
Because we've been the delinquent ones, and it's never too late. But like, I didn't realize, I've heard our bodies are full of water, but I know mushrooms and the water content of a lot of vegetables and whatever, but I didn't realize or picture us sort of the same way. So please expound on our makeup.
Absolutely. And I mean, this comes also from personal experience for me. When I feel stiff, tight, a little bit achy in my joints or whatnot, I often can trace it back to my hydration level being a little compromised or not being very high. And I find that so one thing is they've studied the human body states up to even 70% water, 60 to 70% water, and that varies individuals and whatnot. But that's a lot of water. If you think of a bottle of water filled up 60%, it's up to a certain amount, and that's a lot of water in the body, and it's constantly moving. And it's constantly being used and evaporating. Even as we talk, it's evaporating a little bit as we sweat and anything like that. And it's being used to function every part of our body, and particularly digestion. And all the muscles, and muscles are a great deal of muscle composition is water. And so we can understand why when there's maybe a deficiency in it or some sort of compromised amount in there, you're going to feel some reaction by the cells of the body, and they're usually reactions that make the brain aware. And so we call them pain or ache or stiffness or tightness, something like that. And often we don't think that way. We might not go right to that because we're not used to hearing about water being something that can be used to help muscles that are a little stiff. We might think of something else. We might think it's I don't know, I gotta get a massage. I gotta and that's all great, but you can massage a muscle that's tighter and achy, but you need to also make sure it has enough hydration in it. And so also digestion is affected by it, having the foods be high in water and content in general.
I toast you again, and so in addition to food, it's breath, it's muscle movement, it's relaxation and mentation, and that's what makes us enjoy food and life all the more. Thank you for making me realize that on a weekly basis, or
pleasure.
more than weekly.
No.
Thanks.
It's been fun. Cheers.
Take care.
Thank you.